Clifford, caregiver, funny, responsible, loving, smart, stable, patient, problem juggler, fun to be with, laughed easy, selfless, generous, adventurous, teacher, huggable, provider, kind, sharing, professional, a man. These are all special traits, but if only one person encompasses all of them, then he is above all the others. Our shining example. There was nothing trivial or ordinary about Clifford. Listen to the letter he wrote his parents, so he could go defend his family and country. Listen to his words when he talks about his work, his outstanding work. How he could not talk about top secrets when he was going through them. A normal man could talk about his day. He couldn't mention anything to his wife, the closest person in his life, or to his children at dinner. That must have been very difficult, and yet he was able to push through the difficult times and the unknowing times. Then to retire at such an early age, he jumped at that chance. Now he could enjoy his family, his friends, his favorite foods, his movies, his grandchildren, and his chosen life. A truly remarkable feat that he could work out until his 90s, because he wanted to take care of his girlfriend, as he took care of all of us, whether we knew it or not. Thank you doesn't seem like enough for what you did, all that you accomplished. We can only hope to follow your footsteps, your example. This is his life, Clifford's amazing life. Let's celebrate it and his achievements. For what a lucky fellow he was. How very fortunate we are, the loving family he left behind.
He shaped my life by his love and the caring, attentive man he was. His example was everything to me. Clifford Russell Youngstrom Sr. The early years. On Thursday, December 9th, 1926, at 8:30 a.m., inside a cramped second-story bedroom of a two-family flat located at 1702 South Vandeventer Avenue in St. Louis, Missouri, a boy was born. He was the first male child of his mother, 26-year-old Alma Emma Youngstrom, and the first child of his father, 28-year-old Harry Sylvester Youngstrom. A local physician, Dr. W.C. Gaylor, had been called by Harry sometime after midnight on the 8th to help Alma in the delivery. The doctor also brought along a nurse to assist. According to a story told years later by Harry's younger brother, Herbert, when Harry was presented with a bill of $45 from the doctor for the delivery, which included a $13 charge for the nurse, Harry refused to pay until the bill was amended to remove the charge for the nurse. He was quoted by Herbert as saying, "I didn't want a nurse, only called for a doctor." The boy was christened Clifford Russell. His mother chose his first name Clifford for reasons unknown. Unfortunately, no one in the family ever asked Mother Alma why she chose it, or where in the family it came from. The second name, Russell, was given to the boy by his father Harry, presumably after Russell Bartow, Harry's stepfather, the only father figure young Harry ever remembered seeing living with his mother Hilma, who had married Bartow shortly after the death of Harry's birth father, Carl, in 1908. When Clifford was 9 months old, he survived an estimated F4 tornado that devastated parts of the Vandevenner neighborhood in which he lived. Mother Alma told the story. I was out back taking laundry off the line with baby Cliff on my hip when suddenly the sky turned pitch black and I heard a roaring sound with lots of wind and hail. Harry yelled out the door to me to run back inside. I threw Clifford on top of the clothes in my basket and ran for the door. Harry grabbed me and we ran down to the cellar, and then we heard lots of crashing and glass breaking. I was plenty scared. The Vandevenner neighborhood was hit hard, but fortunately no one was killed in that area. Sadly, 79 people lost their lives and 650 were injured. Clifford's childhood was typically one of deprivation and want.
I can remember that during the winter time, when you had snow, we'd gather some snow and mix it with some kind of a milk of some kind or a little sugar and call it ice cream. It really didn't. It was more or less just a slush. But that was the way we made ice cream. Times were that we didn't have really anything to eat at all, and I can recall making things like mustard sandwiches. You just put some mustard on a piece of bread and that was a sandwich. It wasn't a very good time. I remember one time that for some reason, and I can't recall the circumstances, but I either found or some man gave me a quarter, I can't remember which. Normally what a kid would do is just go out and have a good time, spend it on candy or something, but at that time your sense of responsibility was a little bit different. And I went down to the corner store and I bought canned milk, which is the way I didn't have regular milk, but just buy condensed milk and mix it with water and make milk out of it. But it gives you an idea of the mindset at that time. You just, if you got some money, it went for the family no matter what, as far as trying to just feed yourself.
In 1930, his parents divorced, and Clifford was shuttled back and forth between his mother's apartment, where his older stepsisters Dorothy and Virginia, children Alma had with her first husband, Ira Coleman, also lived, and his father's furnished apartment, where Harry lived with his younger brother Herbert.
Herb had a job, but it didn't pay very much, about $14 a week. And for all of us to live on that was pretty hard, so I can remember Herb telling me that they went down to see if they could get some aid. They gave me some kind of a aid, but they told Herb and my dad that this is not for you, this is for the boy. And you make sure you take good care of him with it.
Clifford said during the Depression he remembered eating mustard sandwiches that Herb packed in his school lunchbox, along with graham crackers for dessert. He learned to play pinochle, watching men in the tavern, and played bottle caps with neighborhood kids in the back alley. Clifford said his friends also created a ball game they collectively called Ledge, where a small rubber ball was tossed up against the beveled edge of a limestone base that ran along the sidewalk, just above the brick walls of the building. At around the age of 8 or 9, he sold the Morning Globe Democrat newspaper at his corner of Russell and Menard to help bring in a little money. I was in charge of gathering all of the guys' money later in the morning and then taking a streetcar to the Globe building at 12th and Olive and turning it in. We would then get a penny for our share of each paper sold. Herbert and Harry had a sister Sybil that lived in southern Missouri near the town of West Plains. One of the highlights of Clifford's childhood was when he was packed off to live on the family farm during the summer months, as soon as school was out. There he could ride horses, bale hay, play in creeks, and was even taught by his Aunt Sybil and Cousin Betty to milk a cow. Clifford said his Aunt Sybil would say she wanted to fatten up that little city boy. He ate well, gained weight, and spent many joyful summers in West Plains. It was a glorious place to forget the troubled life back in St. Louis for a few weeks each summer and just be a boy. During the school year, Clifford attended Humboldt Elementary School in Soulard. and he played lots of neighborhood baseball in nearby Pontiac Square Park, just a few blocks from the school on 9th Street. He was a St. Louis Cardinal and St. Louis Browns fan from an early age. His love for the Cardinals never failed, and he was a fan for the rest of his life. It was 1942, the year when he would meet his future wife-to-be, Barbara Jean Kimmel. He and Barbara told stories of how they would often take the Grand Avenue, Cherokee, Jefferson, and Broadway Peter Witt streetcars on Saturdays and Sundays, and for a dime, ride from one end of a line and back. It was also one of the few ways to spend time together away from home and quietly get to know each other.
And I went to McKinley High School. And I started school there in 1941. Met your mother in about 1942 when I was a sophomore. We went together, I guess, all through high school. At least I went through my junior year. I didn't graduate at that time with your mother because I went into the Navy. But when I was at the high school, I went out for the track team and did pretty good as far as the high jump and the hurdles were concerned. I lettered in track for 2 years. In my junior year, I used to ride my bike up to where your mom lived, and her dad wasn't too keen on her going out at her early young age. I guess she was about 13, 14 years old. But I'd go outside and I'd whistle, and she knew the signal, and she'd find some reason to go to the store, and then she'd meet me outside and we'd walk up to the store together. And well, we were sort of on the sly there. We really, her mother and dad didn't know anything about that. And then at school, after school, we used to take walks, and we'd go up on some real nice streets like Hawthorne and Longfellow, which were two beautiful streets right off of Russell, and we'd walk along, look at all the big houses, and talk about what we were going to do when we got older. So that was a good time of life for me. I remember buying her a little gold cross. At that time, I was working for the Globe Democrat selling papers, and made about $5 a week. And naturally in those days you didn't keep anything you had, you just turned everything over to your mom. My sisters would earn doing little jobs around the neighborhood, and that was what we lived on. The only thing I ever spent that I can remember was this little cross I bought your mother. And I think she still has it. It was a real pretty little gold cross.
Things were about to change, and change rapidly. Clifford was approaching the age where he could, with parental approval, enlist in the Navy. He went to talk to a Navy recruiter who told him to write his mother a letter, explaining in it why he wanted to join the Navy. Years later, Clifford shared this letter with his family.
January 15th, 1943. Dear Mom and Dad, I thought I would write you again because I have something very important to talk over with you. For the last couple of months, I have been thinking very seriously about joining the Navy. Don't laugh because I am no longer a baby. You might think I'm being very foolish and that the only reason I want to join is to show off the uniform. My reasons are very different. It is to fight for the freedom that we have so long preserved and to fight for those we love. After the war, I would have learned a good trade and could have a swell job. I know it isn't as easy as all that, and there will be a lot of fighting before this war is over. I might as well go now and get my crack at the Japanese or Nazis, because if I don't, what good will I be if they took us over into slavery? If more fellows felt the way I do about this war and stopped their belly aching, this war would be over a darn sight sooner. Just ask Dad what he's fighting for, and he'll tell you that he's fighting for you and me and others like me. That's just what I want to do, fight for the best mom and dad a fellow ever had, and a couple of good sisters too. Don't think I'm being silly in that I'm too young to fight, because it's going to be the young fellows like me that will win this war, and don't think they won't. I'm not too young, and I'm as big as a man. I'm 6 foot tall and weigh 165 pounds. Not exaggerating. Lots of my chums at school have joined the Army or Navy, and over half of them were 16 or 17 years old. The Navy would make a real man out of me. You remember when I talked it over with you last year? Well, I have been thinking about it ever since then. I know it will be very dangerous, but I will hold up as well as anyone else, or I wouldn't be worthy of the name Youngstrom. I would miss you and Dad something awful, but it is more important to rid the world of such tyrants as those we have to encounter.
Alma gave her permission, and Clifford enlisted in the United States Navy on January 29, 1944. When Clifford told Barbara he had enlisted and would not be graduating with his senior class at McKinley High the coming September, he said she cried. He promised he would come back to her and to please write to him. Barbara promised she would and told him she would wait for him. Clifford took a troop train from St. Louis's Union Station the first week of February 1944. Both Barb and Alma were tearfully there to see him off. His destination was the Naval Recruits Training Command Center in Great Lakes, Illinois, located on the western shore of Lake Michigan. By the end of March, he was a newly trained recruit ready for the next stage in his Navy experience: how to become a U.S. sailor armed with the lethal skills required to successfully fight for his country. Clifford and USS Crowley was assigned to Task Force 38, a portion of the Third Fleet that was conducting air raids against Japanese airfields. On December 18, 1944, Task Force 38 ran headfirst into one of the most powerful typhoons ever seen in the South Pacific.
So we're aiming toward the Third Fleet, and the weather starts getting nasty. And I mean, looking terrible. They knew after a while that what we were heading into was a typhoon, but it was getting worse. And then things got unbelievable. And what happens, you go this way, you look up and there's a wall of water. It's like a dream or something. A huge amount of water is going to come down on you, and then it rolls the other way, and now it's over here. This went on for the length of time we were in that typhoon was about 12 to 18 hours. We found out that the Spence in the Monahan and the hull went down. So these three capsized. We were told to just tie yourself to anything that you think will hold, and we had everything battened down as tight as we could have them. You saw people out in life rafts from these sunken ships, and you'd see them bob up over here. And before you could even think about trying to get them, which if you try to get out of that trough, you're going to tear yourself up, and then they bob up over here. You don't know how many of those people were picked up or washed up on something or whatever else. So we ended up losing, I know, 900 men on the three destroyers that went down. When it finally starts subsiding, ships were damaged badly. My chief gunner's mate was about as nasty a guy as you ever want to see in your life. Been in the Navy all his life. And I was, 18 years old, something like that. I didn't, this was a sort of an exciting thing happening. So I'm tied up here on the boat deck, and I look down on the next deck, and he's on his knees praying. And he'd been around forever.
The storm was called Typhoon Cobra, and it did as much damage to the fleet as an engagement with the Japanese. The Navy Department did not report the casualties to the general public, as it would have been a major blow to morale, and details of the typhoon were kept secret until after the war. The Battle of Iwo Jima lasted an incredible 4 months, from the time of the first naval bombardments to the Army and Marines finally securing the island. To open the battle, hundreds of ships ranging from enormous Iowa-class battleships down to little destroyer escorts all pounded the Japanese positions around the clock for 4 days. The crew of the Crowley also noticed something during the Battle of Iwo Jima that they had never seen before in all their previous battles. Enemy Zeros purposely diving on and crashing into U.S. ships. After all the landings were over and later in the afternoon, Clifford noticed through the lens of his gun sight an American flag being raised atop the largest hill on Iwo Jima. Clifford said later that he was glad to be a sailor and to be doing his fighting at sea. Lying in a foxhole was not for me, he said. The Army and Marines really took a beating at Iwo, but the Navy really caught it at Okinawa. When the Crowley arrived at Okinawa with the Fifth Fleet on April 1st, 1945, they immediately began a massive bombardment, the most ordnance thrown by the U.S. Navy in one engagement throughout the entire war. Unfortunately, this softening of the beaches was not necessary, as most of the Japanese were in the interior of the island, dug in miles from the beach, so the Army and Marines landed virtually unopposed. But for the Navy, it was a bloodbath. The ships were pummeled by Japanese kamikaze suicide planes that were estimated in numbers approaching 2,800 planes. A single kamikaze came in at our fantail, maybe 20 feet above the water, at 100 miles an hour and maybe 400 to 500 yards away. Our guys were all trained on it, but we couldn't pull the triggers because fire control had not cleared us to engage. All we could do was watch it get closer. USS Pennsylvania was nearby, and she must have finally received clearance to fire, and she blew it to pieces just yards away from us. If that plane had hit our stern depth charge racks, we would have gone up like the 4th of July. That old battle wagon saved our keisters. After the 2.5-month Okinawa campaign was completed, the Fifth Fleet, the largest combat fleet the world had ever seen, with 535 warships, was slated to begin Operation Olympic, the invasion of the Japanese home islands, scheduled to begin November 1st. But on August 6, 1945, the United States deployed the first atomic bomb in history over the Japanese city of Hiroshima and later Nagasaki, ending the war.
August the 15th, 1945, USS Crowley. Dearest, how's my short girl tonight? As lovely as ever, no doubt. Well, honey, I guess by now you've heard about the Japanese surrendering unconditionally. It was quite a happy day aboard the Crowley, as it was probably aboard every ship out here. We first heard the news as we were listening to the ship's radio this morning. Most of the fellows just sat there, not saying anything at all, just inwardly realizing that at last it was all over. Of course, there were a few of the guys who had to let it go and raise hell. One of my best buddies got hold of a duck mating horn that someone had stashed away and ran all over the ship blowing it as loud as he could, and that was pretty loud. Of course, he hasn't been home in over 2 years, so that accounts for his actions. For myself, I feel pretty good. This means that I'll probably get home in one piece and see the one who I've missed for so long. I sure hope we get home soon, but there's still a big job for the Navy to do out here. Well, Butch, I'd better sign off now. But remember, I love you, and I hope to see you standing there when I come home again. Will you?
Question mark.
Loved, Cliff.
On November 26, 1947, 4 weeks and 6 days after his discharge, Clifford R. Youngstrom Sr. was married to Barbara Jean Kimmel at Lafayette Park Methodist Church, St. Louis, Missouri. In November 1947, Clifford and Barbara Youngstrom started their married life together in a basement. It was a small, 2-family flat on Park Avenue, 1 block east of Grand. The housing crisis that developed after the end of the war was in full bloom, and U.S. veterans were clamoring over each other, looking for a place to live. Sometime in the spring of 1948, tragedy hit the young newlyweds. Barbara had lost her first baby to miscarriage. The couple was devastated, but soon another child would be on the way. As Barbara started to show the unmistakable signs of motherhood, they would have to move. Clifford had heard at work about the recent conversion of many old wooden barracks buildings at Jefferson Barracks into low-income housing. He immediately began setting things in motion. When the time finally came, Clifford took his laboring wife to St. Mary's Hospital in Clayton, a very special place that would see the births of all 6 of their children. Clifford would leave the Park Avenue apartment for good on March 26th and bring Barbara and baby Gregory Allen home to their new apartment on Halsey Street in Jefferson Barracks.
We were on Park Avenue right near Grand. But while Barb was in the hospital getting ready to deliver Greg, we had made application for Jefferson Barracks and it came through. So Bob Portner and Al Portner and a couple of other friends of mine, we moved while Barb was in the hospital down to an apartment in the barracks, Jefferson Barracks.
Kids were everywhere, Barbara would say later. It was a dusty, busy place full of noise, and it was a very close-knit community. In the 5 years that Barbara and Clifford lived at Jefferson Barracks, they met 4 special couples that they would cherish for the rest of their lives. Rich and Lois Richulewski, Dan and Marie Malterman, Red and Jean Dames, and Bob and Helen Portner. On November 23, 1951, Clifford and Barbara brought home their first and only daughter, Patricia Jean. In early 1952, the Youngstrom family moved to a section of Jefferson Barracks that boasted 2-bedroom barracks building. Some of Clifford and Barbara's fellow tenants were also now experiencing population growths of their own, and in turn moved to the 2-bedroom complexes on Kilner. Things were quietly moving along in the barracks until in December 1952, little Patricia began exhibiting signs of muscle weakness that concerned her parents. Ever since the mid-1950s, a polio epidemic had been raging through the U.S., taking the lives of children in great numbers, and with no vaccine to date, was a terrifying prospect for parents of small children. The doctors diagnosed Patricia with polio, and a regimen of aggressive muscle exercises were prescribed.
But they put her in isolation, and we had to leave her there, and that was a hard thing to do. You could see her through this window, and she was being helped by the nurses and all, so we knew she was in good care, but it was tough to. And during that week she was in isolation, we would visit, but we couldn't actually hold her and get to see her.
Little Patricia did not adapt well to anyone other than Clifford working with her, a minimum of 3 hours a day.
An early memory I have is being in the hospital when I had polio. I was only about 18 months old, but I remember Dad rolling me up and down the hallway in a wheelchair, and I thought that was a lot of fun. Then when I was home and had to have physical therapy, Dad would make a game of it. He was such a clever guy.
A polio vaccine finally became available on March 26, 1953, and a month or so later, little Patricia was inoculated. Fortunately, Patricia's polio never developed past the muscle weakness in her arms and legs. Clifford worked with her for nearly a year, and the young parents would see their little girl get stronger and would say for the rest of their lives, "Dr. Jonas Salk and the March of Dimes saved our baby." A little over a year and a half later, on August 6, 1954, Clifford and Barbara left St. Mary's Hospital again, this time with little Scott Michael in tow.
St. Mary's, I always used to have to go up in the father's waiting room. Then the doctor, after they delivered the babies, you didn't get to be with your wife like it is in your time. We didn't get to do a lot of things. We were just sort of like a third thumb. Had to go up and wait in the waiting room, and then we'd wait till the doctor delivered the baby and everything was fine. And then he would call you and tell you what happened and let you see your wife and baby, and that was it. So I went up to the father's waiting room. There's one more guy there sitting, waiting. I sat down and we talked for just a few minutes. The phone rang, and he went over and answered it because it was going to be for him. He talked to whoever it was, and he said, "It's for you." So I picked up the phone, and Dr. Jones said, "You got a boy?" I couldn't believe it. We'd been in the hospital 15 minutes. We almost had to deliver Scott on the way to the hospital. I wouldn't have liked that too much. It was sort of scary.
There were now 5 Youngstrom persons at Jefferson Barracks, and the 2-bedroom apartment was feeling crowded. Clifford wanted to move, and had heard all about the new subdivisions being built in the far west regions of St. Louis County. He had always wanted to own his own home.
Well, we stayed at the barracks, I think, then for just a few more months. Scott was a little baby. The Portners were going to move out to Baldwin somewhere, and they were going to go out and look at a house out there, because we'd gotten word that the barracks was going to shut down. So we drove out with them, and we looked at some homes that they were building in West Ridge Acres in Baldwin. And after a couple trips out there, I sort of felt like we ought to get our own home. Price was right, and just got a raise to where it would be possible for us to move and to get into with a GI loan. Early 55, we moved out to Baldwin in a brand new house.
He talked with Barbara's Aunt Mary, who had just started working as a realtor. She found a little house at 62 Highview Drive in the small town of Baldwin, 25 miles from Jefferson Barracks. Clifford and family would soon be heading west. Leaving Jefferson Barracks behind to move the family to Baldwin, Missouri. It was a small 2-bedroom frame house sitting on almost an acre of ground with a large creek in the backyard named Fishpot.
But things started changing for Barbara that would impact her and the family. She was now suffering from depression, the terror of her daughter's polio, an isolated rural home, and dealing with the demands of 3 growing children. While Barbara was at St. Joseph Hospital, she was nursed by the nuns of the Order of St. Joseph, and when she came home, she told her husband, "Those nuns were so kind and gentle and took such good care of me. I felt so loved there that I really would like for us to be Catholic." So in 1958, they converted to Catholicism and joining Holy Infant Parish, and the next year Gregory, Patricia, and Scott attended the Holy Infant School, where they were lucky enough to survive the Nuns of Mercy corporal punishment.
The Youngstroms stayed rooted there for 7 years. During that time, Clifford and Barbara welcomed 2 more boys to the family. Clifford Russell Jr. on January 19th, 1959, followed by John Andrew, born September 25th, 1960. In November, Aunt Mary found a single-story ranch house at 1002 North Woodlawn Avenue in the town of Kirkwood, Missouri, about 20 miles east of Baldwin. On January 24th, 1963, the Youngstrom household became residents of Kirkwood, Missouri. Exactly 2 months later, the final Youngstrom child, little Stephen James, was born and brought home from St. Mary's Hospital. For the next 39 years, Clifford and Barbara stayed put at 1002 North Woodlawn, the longest place of residence in their lives.
63, Steve came along, or he was coming along, let's put it that way. We got our opportunity to move from Baldwin after 8 years when Aunt Mary found us a house in Kirkwood, good old 1002. And strange as it might sound, another raise came along exactly at the right time and exactly in the right amount to allow us to move in the home on Woodlawn. And I had a few of my friends out in Baldwin that helped me move. We made the living room into a barracks for the boys. Mom was pregnant with Steve, and in March, 2 months after we moved into Kirkwood, Steve was born.
When the parents took the kids to see 1002 North Woodlawn, the place was empty. Greg, Patty, and Scott would run around the empty house, and we could not believe the immense size of the house. It had bedrooms, and it had a breezeway and a complete downstairs that was tiled, and a room in the basement, another room. I remember that day scouting around, checking out everything. and I couldn't believe we were going to move to this big mansion.
As I recall living at 1002 North Woodlawn, in the early years, it was like a barrack situation. What ended up being the living room when you walked in the front door was a room with at least 3 young men in it, me, Russ, and Steve, and it was just beds everywhere. And the breezeway area was the living room at those days. And I recall in that neighborhood, we terrorized it pretty good. We did all kinds of things, from burning trees down in people's yards to shooting out their windows with BB guns. And we didn't have dogs that got loose because we didn't have a dog, but we probably would have done that too. But growing up in Woodlawn was a pretty nice adventure every day.
Some family memories I have would be the 15-cent hamburger from Sandy's. Remember those? The live nativity at Warson Woods every Christmas. Dad coming home every day from work with the newspaper folded underneath his arm, and he'd give me half a stick of double mint gum. I thought I was some hot stuff. Dad taking me to the Doherty Ferry parking lot to practice driving. And every Christmas, Dad and I would go to the Kirkwood High School Christmas concert put on by the a cappella choir. And at the end, he would cheer up when myself and all the other alumni would go to the stage to sing the benediction. This remains one of my special memories.
And I had discovered Kat's Drugstore sold Playboy magazines, and I went in and bought a Playboy magazine, and I brought it home, and I thought, boy, I'll be in trouble if somebody finds this, so I'm going to hide it. And I hid it up on one of the air conditioning, heating ducts downstairs up on top of one of those. And for some reason, I don't know how, but for some reason, one of you guys found that, and I got in big trouble.
I found it only because I saw you putting something up there one day, and then later when you left, I investigated. And not only did I find one magazine, I found like a year's supply of them. Thanks, Greg.
I had fond memories of growing up in Kirkwood. It's the only city I knew as a child growing up. The folks and everyone moved into the house on Woodlawn in January of '63, and I was born that March. It was a great place to grow up as a kid, real safe, and I miss it at times.
My lover stands on golden sands and watches the ships.
When I was 19 years old, I was a licensed practical nurse. I wanted to join the Navy just like my dad. I went downtown to the Mart building, spoke with a recruiter, and told him I'm interested in being on a hospital ship. He became very embarrassed and told me, "Ma'am, one woman on a ship of 400 men is just not allowed." I look back and wonder what the heck was he smoking. So I would have gone in as a corpsman, received my education to become a first lieutenant, and I thought that was so cool so that all the enlisted men would have to salute me. But it was not to be. Upon my physical, they found out I was on medication for seizures, therefore could not join the Navy. I was crushed. I went home and sobbed. Then I worked as an LPN for several years, went back to school to receive my RN.
Beyond the sea, and never again I'll go sailing.
Clifford and Barbara had 6 children, and from those 6 children came these 15 grandchildren. Kimberly Michelle Wynn Pugh, September 21st, 1979. Andrew Michael Best, December 30th, 1980. Scott Michael Youngstrom Jr., June 24th, 1981. Sarah Elizabeth Fike, February 7th, 1982. Sarah Jane Evans, July 13th, 1982. Leanne Hitt, January 12, 1984. Michael Thomas Youngstrom, March 25, 1985. Jesse Stewart Youngstrom, June 27, 1986. Nicholas Taylor Youngstrom, March 27, 1989. Talia Charisse Lanker, May 13, 1990. Haley Bridget Youngstrom, January 9, 1991. Emily Ann Youngstrom Yost, April 18, 1991. Elena Marie Youngstrom Woods, January 11, 1994. Erica Rhiannon Culpepper, April 16, 1994. And 15 great-grandchildren to date, for a total of 29 grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
Listen, I've traveled every road in this here land. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the deserts bare, man. I breathed the mountain air, man. On travel I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere.
Clifford began his retirement at the beginning of 1982, and for 38 years he and Barbara started a new life together. Their lives going forward was focused on their growing family of grandchildren, their kids of course, and traveling. In the early 60s, they loaded up the red Chevy station wagon and drove from St. Louis to Orlando, Florida to visit Barb's Uncle Dale. They took along their first 3 children and enjoyed for the first time the Atlantic Ocean and had a wonderful visit. The youngest 3 stayed with Aunt Kay and Uncle Bill. Bless their hearts.
When I was 12 years old, I remember going to Florida with Greg and Scott in our brand new red station wagon. Along the way, we would dine at Morrison's cafeterias, and they had the best fried shrimp in the world.
Over the years, Cliff and Barb went on trips to Arizona, New York City, New England, and many trips around Missouri and Arkansas, with a memorable family reunion in the Ozarks Lake region. Patricia and Larry went on 2 wonderful cruises with the couple to the Caribbean and to the islands of Hawaii. Life was far from dull.
I guess the best experience I had with Dad, one-on-one, was when this would be about 1980. Me and Amy had just come back from the Missouri State Fair, and I had an old truck. It was a 63 Chevy. And me and my neighbor had done a valve job on it. It was running really good. And I told Dad at the dinner table, Mom was there, Dad was there, Amy was there. I was dating Amy. And I said, boy, Amy, I'd drive that truck anywhere. Right? It's running really good now. And Dad just kind of stopped eating and looked at me and says, would you drive it to Boston? And I'm like, sure, I'd drive it to Boston. That was like a Friday night, and I think Monday we were driving to Boston with a load of Scott's items, big desk, beer cans, and ball cards. And we drove, and we got to Ohio. We tried to get we were wiped out. We tried to get a motel, and this place in Ohio was near Kent State, and all the hotels were filled with people dropping kids off. So we slept for at least a half an hour in this 63 Chevy truck and then started driving again. And we drove back and forth. We took turns. And on the way back, a little detail in here is I had an 8-track player in that, and I had 2 8-tracks that we listened to. Willie Nelson, Stardust, and Waylon Jennings. And on the way back, somewhere in Illinois, as the sun was rising, he said, let's get something to eat at a truck stop. And we pull in there, and his hair was really, this is 2 days on the road hair. And he just grabbed my cowboy hat and shoved it on. He says, let's go do this. And we went into the truck stop. I followed my cowboy dad into the truck stop in Illinois. And we talked about that trip the rest of our adult lives and reminisced. Yeah. Dad, you were a good guy, and we miss you.
Cowboy Dad.
Cowboy Dad.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Fenway Park.
Clifford's love for the game of baseball started during the St. Louis Cardinals' 1934 season with the Gas House Gang. There have been many memorable teams in the storied history of baseball, but none of them were as colorful as the St. Louis Cardinals' Gas House Gang of 1934. The grand architect of the Gas House Gang was the eminent Branch Rickey as club president.
Depression was the word. Bread lines, apples on street corners. Oh, all the cliches of economic upheaval.
Well, I hope that I can beat him today. I think it's a great honor for me to pitch the opening day of the World Series of 1934.
1934, the culmination of much planning, much hard work, and some luck. Frankie Frisch managing the club, the deans, Pepper Martin, Joe Medvick, Delancey, Collins, and a shortstop named Leo DeRocher. I might name every man. Frank Graham of the New York Sun called it the Gas House Gang. And what a gang it was.
The Cardinals, a perennial losing team, was rumored to be sold to another city, when Rickey came up with the idea that local merchants would invest in the club by buying stock. Each investor who bought $50 worth of stock would receive one ticket, which was to be used for one kid during the season. These were called knot-hole tickets, and an entire section was set apart for what was to be called the knot-hole gang.
While I lived with Herb and Dad, I remember in 1934, I started taking an interest in baseball, and that was the year the Cardinals had the Gas House Gang. Really a good bunch of ball players with Dizzy Dean and Paul Dean and Pepper Martin, and they won the pennant that year, and they won the World Series playing against Detroit. And I can remember listening to a couple of those games on radio, and I think that was when I first became real interested in baseball.
In 1920, the Cards moved into Sportsman's Park. Then they made a trade for Hall of Famer Rogers Hornsby. Finally, in 1926, the Cardinals won their first ever National League pennant. They won a thrilling 7-game series over the New York Yankees against overwhelming odds with an aging and perhaps intoxicated Grover Cleveland Alexander, winning the deciding game in relief. The Gas House Gang included Hall of Fame players such as Dizzy Dean and his brother Paul Dean, Frankie Frisch, Pepper Martin, and Joe Ducky Medwick. During Clifford's lifetime, his Cardinals won 11 World Series championships, starting in the year of his birth, 1926, and with their last win in 2011. He was always very interested with his Cardinals and on all the players he fell in love from an early age. He followed them at Sportsman's Park up until 1965, then on to Bush Memorial Stadium from 1966 to 2005, and to their new home, Busch Stadium, which opened in 2006, when the Cardinals won their 10th World Series that year.
Going to a ball game at Busch Memorial Stadium when I was a kid was a great adventure. Last minute tickets, buy them at the window, garage door opens, we all run and try to get a seat in the bleachers. That's great. And we always went for batting practice, which was awesome. Sit in the bleachers, waiting for the home runs to come in. Clifford would catch balls out there or break his finger, either one, at a record pace. One time, someone smacked it out there, and he moved over to the aisle, just like a cagey outfielder, and boom, caught it in a cup of his hands and gave it to me. What a thrill. What a thrill. My dad, what a thrill.
What kind of dad was Clifford? He was a dad that sacrificed. And here's one little story. I remember we went to a baseball game. He took all of us to a bleachers game. The Cardinals playing somebody. I think it was probably Pittsburgh. And the Cardinals are losing, and the game looks like it's over. So about after the 7th inning or 8th inning, he says, hey, let's go. And so, a night game, so it's probably like 10 o'clock. And we get on Highway 40, and we're making great time. And as we're driving along, Jack Buck gives a 3-run homer call right to the bleachers we were sitting at. And I remember being so disappointed that I wasn't at the game. We were in the car because we had to leave early. But I didn't realize it was only about a 4-hour a night sleep for him, because he'd get up at 5 o'clock every day to go to work. And I didn't give him a break then, but I want to give him a break now. That guy took us to ball games, and he probably fell asleep the next day at work. Love you, Dad. Thanks for all the ball.
I worked as a civilian in a federal civil service agency of the Department of Defense. The nature of my work required a security check. The higher the security clearance, the deeper the investigation. I ultimately attained a security clearance of top secret and beyond that for special projects. At my retirement debriefing, I was told that I was forbidden to discuss anything considered classified until it had been released to the public.
One time we were out in the front yard and you could see this white plane go by, a little contrail from a plane, but it was real big. And he goes, "You know what that is? B-52, loaded with nukes." And he got a pair of binoculars on and he goes, "They're up there 24/7 flying around."
My career didn't have such an interesting beginning. In April 1948, I was 21 years old and had been married 4 months when I visited the Missouri State Employment Office in St. Louis and learned of a full-time opening as a cartographic aide at the chart plant. I was happy to be hired at $28 per week and reported to work at the chart plant building at 12th and Delmar. My most interesting and enjoyable work began in 1959 and continued until 1969. I was promoted to chief of a branch of 180 people involved in the compilation of aeronautical charts worldwide. In 1957, Russia sent the satellite Sputnik into orbit, which caused the United States to place the highest priority on developing our space programs.
In the middle 60s, things started picking up an awful lot of work as far as my job was assigned to special projects, which got involved in a lot of interesting work. Everything from support work for our troops in Vietnam, which were quite active on that, the lunar work of mapping the moon and preparing the products that were being used by manned space flight when it started, all the way from the first shot when Alan Shepard went up and made one short hop around and came right back down. Neil Armstrong landed on the moon in the late 60s. It was very interesting work, very demanding work. Deadlines were just almost impossible sometimes.
NASA was established and pushed hard to advance the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, and lunar programs. The first 7 astronauts were also selected at that time. Newly elected President John F. Kennedy declared that the United States would put a man on the moon in the 60s. The first phase of the space program involved the production of charts used by NASA's first astronauts for space travel. This started with Alan Shepard's first space mission in 1961 to Neil Armstrong's walk on the moon in 1969, and the early space shuttle missions. This work required production of a variety of unique products, and in some cases no source material existed. An example of this was the compilation of lunar landing charts. Satellite photography of the moon had to be obtained, including coverage of its dark side, which had never been seen before. NASA scientists and astronauts selected potential landing sites from these charts. In addition to the products for space programs in the 60s, I was involved in producing many special products in support of the Vietnam War effort. This involved a lot of travel to Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, and various Air Force bases to coordinate our joint efforts and to inspect work we had contracted to commercial companies. On November 22, 1963, I was at work getting ready to leave the next day on one of my inspection trips when I learned that President Kennedy had been assassinated. A sad trip indeed. A fascinating assignment during this time was the charting of the Antarctic continent. Since very little was known of this area, I was sent to Washington, D.C. to pick the brains of scientists and explorers who had spent time traveling and studying that barren continent. It took a few years to accomplish this assignment, and we were very proud of the resulting charts. In those days, the Smithsonian Museum stayed open until 10 p.m., and the U.S. Army Band held concerts some evenings on the bank of the Potomac River by the Lincoln Memorial. I enjoyed both very much. During my travels, a few of the trips were memorable. I had to fly to Philadelphia on a 4th of July night and was amazed by the fireworks exploding below. Every little town had their own celebration going on, and it seems like we flew over 100 of them. It was a beautiful sight. On another flight from Detroit to St. Louis, the pilot told us he was going to a higher altitude to avoid some bad weather. As we went higher, the weather cleared up beautifully. But below us we saw debris swirling around in black and green clouds. The pilot informed us that we were flying over a tornado. Scary. The most aggravating trip I ever took was when we lived in Baldwin. One Sunday morning, Greg, Patty, and I went blackberry picking across the creek from our house. I left for Philadelphia that night for a very important 2-day meeting with contractors. I awoke the next morning with a severe case of chigger bites. The meeting that day was terrible, as I tried not to scratch and made frequent visits to the restroom to claw at myself. As I explained what I needed to a pharmacist, he looked embarrassed and said he didn't know what chiggers were, but that he had something to treat crabs. I got the same look and response at another drugstore and concluded that chiggers are not a problem in Philadelphia. I bought a bottle of clear nail polish and painted each bite in an effort to suffocate the critters burrowed underneath my skin. The next day's meeting went a lot better. I was offered the position of Center Liaison Officer to the United Kingdom or Indonesia, but declined for family reasons. we decided that uprooting ourselves when I was getting close to retirement didn't make much sense. While I was proud to be acknowledged for my accomplishments and promoted to more responsible positions, some of my happiest times were in the early days when I was involved in the actual work of producing charts. I retired from the center on December 25th, 1981, and what a great Christmas present that was. Counting my 4 years in the Navy and my time with the center, I spent nearly 40 years serving the United States. I'm very proud of that service.
So it's been raining just a little bit there. What campsite are you in?
We're in 408.
Is that the primary or primo campsite to get?
Well, we like it because it drains well.
Yeah, I can see that. That's great. I think you can fish from your cabin door.
Or from the picnic table.
Yeah. And there's the Great Canal.
Yeah.
All right.
It's filled up.
And there's the horseshoes that are stalled right now.
After hours of driving in the darkness, the hunters emerge from the woods, heading to their secret spots where they will capture the elusive trout, brown or rainbow. It doesn't really matter. They're after their quota. The young man being mentored by the older gentleman with the very large feet. His nickname is Maritime Man. His shoe size, an enormous 15. Waders had to be specially made for this large of a geography to cover. As they wander along, they look for signs of happy hunting. They look down to the ground to see if a truck has dropped by and see the marks of the tires. These will be happy hunting grounds today. The sun still not breaking day, the morning dawn still emerging. They don't say anything of value. They're both nervous. They're too coy to say anything to give away where they will actually drop their lines. There's those 15s we talked about. But as they move along, years of training and practice, muscle memory is about to erupt on the unwitting, unknowing prey. And now the older gentleman, the master, years and decades of experience, saunters into the 50-degree crystal clear water harboring his prey. He points and he walks through an area of treacherous slippery, waiting, watching, smelling the morning air, hearing the bird calls, the late morning owls still hooting away. Yes, this man named Clifford, is about to embark. Be careful out there, Clifford. You never know, you might take another spill. Be careful under that tree. Your line could get tangled and snagged. Prepare your your jig for the first cast of the day. What they don't know is, at the end of the day, will their stringers be clean and empty or full of rainbow and brown trout?
One thing that he did that changed my life in some respect is he taught me the joy of trout fishing. He learned by watching others and realized that using 20-pound catfish line was not going to do it. He mastered stuff over time, though, and got a skill that he shared with us and turned us all into pretty good fishermen. Most unforeseen consequence that came from trout fishing with Dad was my slow realization that the trout stream is a sacred place of calm and beauty. The stream refreshed my soul and helped relieve the stresses from work. The special time with Dad and my brothers on the Current River became so much more than just fishing and camping. It really opened my heart with gratitude for being so blessed to have such a good man as Cliff for my dad. Those September fishing trips were, to me, really a confirmation of God's love for us. And it was pretty clearly seen by the presence of Dad standing quietly in his waders, fishing in crystal clear water. It was a slow and continuous permanent change in my soul that really impacted my life.
So the first memory I have of my dad taking us fishing would have been at the De Pere Park. There's a lake behind there, and originally was the old Germans Lutheran orphanage. It's a memory. I was probably 5 or 6 years old. I do remember we didn't even have fishing poles. We had cane poles, and we would dig up worms in the backyard and go fishing behind the old orphanage there. We did okay. We caught some sunfish. That's really the first memory I have of fishing with Dad. I do remember there was a guy we watched who had a real fishing pole, and he was catching sunfish, and we thought that was so neat because we had cane poles. I had a good time. I remember eating lunch and getting sunburned a little bit. Most of the fish we caught were pretty small, and we threw them back, but I remember having a blast. It was wonderful.
My most memorable fishing story with Dad was when he had shortly retired in 1981 and took me fishing that summer to Montauk, and I had just graduated from high school, and we stayed in Reed's Cabins. He woke up in the middle of the night after fishing one day and had a leg cramp and went shooting out of the bed and tripped and fell and hit his face on the table and then fell to his back on the floor. All this happened in the darkness, and it was quite a stir to wake me up. When I turned on the light, he was just laying there on his back, and so it actually knocked him out for a short time, but he was okay and woke up the next day. I told him we probably should go home, and he thought, no, he said he wants to go ahead and fish some, so we did that. And he was fishing over by the white oak tree a little bit later in the morning. I walked up behind him, and as he turned, his profile was profound. It was just nothing but lips I saw, because his lips were all swollen from when he had fallen. And that was a memory that stuck in my mind for a long time, and he was such a trooper about that.
As we got better at fishing, we would sometimes go down for a weekend at Montauk, and we'd stay in Reed's Cabins. A lot of times that included Uncle Bill and Will. We all stayed in one cabin one evening, and it turned out that we had too many people for that cabin, and that was the famous line that Dennis Medlock, who owned the cabins, told us, "Well, Cliff, rules are rules." We had to get an extra cabin. But Bill and Dad were just trying to save money, I'm sure. Uncle Bill, he was fantastic. We had a good time with him fishing as well, except when he would eat chili dogs late in the evening. We all paid the price for that overnight. And he snored like a chainsaw, he really did. But we didn't care. We were young kids, and we were having a blast. Even one time, I think it was Will, came up with the idea of walking down the woods to a bluff, and we could throw these huge rocks over the bluff, and then a certain 3 or 4 seconds would pass, and then we'd hear a crash and hit something metal. And we thought that was great. We would throw rocks off the cliff and listen to it hit. And then we realized we weren't just throwing rocks off the cliff down into a ravine. They were going and hitting a mobile home down there, which was actually like a bait store.
We found a bluff, and we found these head-sized rocks, and we were shot putting them over the edge, and we could hear them hitting something, and it was going boom. And we said that was pretty neat. So we threw something else, boom, and then we could hear people screaming, hey, hey, and then we stopped, of course, and we ran back to the cabin. And about then, Dennis Metlock come riding down on a lawnmower at about 80 miles an hour, power slid in the front, and he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, Cliff. Rules the rules. There's only 5 in a cabin. You're going to have to leave because the rules are rules." And I think we had one more than it could, giving us a wink and a nod until then, but he took us out. Throwing rocks on a trailer that was turned into a tavern at the bottom of the hill there, and we could have killed somebody. Me, Will, and Steve, me, Will, and Russ mainly. Steve was still. I remember we really had to shot put these things. They were heavy. Fishing. It wasn't just any fishing. My dad liked to trout fish. He tried the catfish and he tried to do all these other types of fishing, but I have a picture of him when he was 39 fishing at Bennett Springs, and I was a little kid, and they rented a camper, a pop-up camper, and then we went into doing cabins. Bennett Springs is where we cut our teeth learning how to catch trout. He told us one summer we were going to go to a new place, and that was called Montauk, and his friend Luke at work had told him about a better place than Bennett Springs for catching trout. And so we went down to Montauk. We would go down once a year. It seemed like a week, and sometimes Will and Bill would come down too. And we would just basically all go our own way and fish together a little bit and then just go up and down the river. But he'd just park the car by the white oak hole on the bridge, and we would just fish all day long. And then Russ and Greg started a fishing tradition in September of every year. They'd go down for a week, and Dad would come down, and all the brothers, whoever was around and in town, would come. And that became an annual event. Those are some great memories of fishing. A lot of good pictures in the beautiful state park at Montauk. I fished there a few times since Dad's passed away, and it's like I just could see him around the corner or up the river, and it's almost like he's still there. So thanks, Dad, for taking us fishing, and thanks for showing us how to catch trout.
Does your dog bite? No? Oh. Nice doggy. I thought you said your dog did not bite.
That is not my dog.
From the thrilling pages of world-renowned author C.S. Forester's story, and filmed in the jungles and at the headwaters of Africa, the Dark Continent, in all the magnificence of color by Technicolor, comes the most exciting adventure ever screened.
Grandpa Cliff loved his movies, which started at a very early age. In the 1930s, he could just walk down the street to the movie houses and put himself in the stories he was watching.
I can remember times when I lived with Herb and Dad. It was in the area of near Grand and Olive, sort of a midtown area, I think they called it. And there were a lot of movie theaters. There was the Fox, naturally, and then there was another one called the Schubert, and another one called the St. Louis, and another one called the Missouri, and Empress was the name of another one. So with so many movies within a block or two of me, I got to go to the movies a lot.
Not only did Grandpa Cliff love going to the movies at the theater, he also loved live shows.
My sisters and I, on a Saturday morning, would get up early and we'd walk on the Mart building. But we'd get there and we could sit in the audience and listen to the program. They had Pappy Cheshire. He would sing and he'd play the banjo and he'd play the guitar, and sort of like you'd go to a television station and watch a TV show being made. And then on certain nights there were great radio comedians like Jack Benny and Fred Allen, and then there were certain things like The Shadow, a number of different programs that you sat at the radio and just kept your ear right to it, and that was your entertainment then, because TV wasn't around.
He loved his TV comedies like Show of Shows with early comedy legends Mel Brooks, Carl Reiner, Neil Simon, Larry Gelbart, and Woody Allen, also starring Sid Caesar and Imogene Coca. Grandpa Cliff had many favorite movie genres: comedies, westerns, military movies, dramas. He passed on his love for film to his children and grandchildren. Here are but a few.
Yes, miss?
The current's quite strong here, isn't it?
Yes, we're getting near the rapids.
Really? So soon?
Just around that bend. Kind of dangerous. Better let me take over.
You're filthy.
What?
You're dirty and filthy and sloppy.
Now it's you, Thelma. That's the way I always look, ain't it?
Well, I want you to clean up right now. Wash your hands and face and comb your hair. My sister's coming to visit us, and I don't want her to see you like that. She's a lady.
Your sister coming here?
Yes.
To visit us?
Yes.
You want me to wash up?
Yes.
I ain't gonna wash up.
Yes, you are.
Shut up.
Shut up yourself.
Bill! Hell.
Dr. Frankenstein.
Frankenstein.
You're putting me on.
No, it's pronounced Frankenstein.
Do you also say Frodwick?
No, Frederick.
Well, why isn't it Frodwick Frankenstein?
It isn't. It's Frederick Frankenstein.
I see.
You must be Igor.
No, it's pronounced Igor.
But they told me it was Igor.
Well, they were wrong then, weren't they?
Lonesome Dove.
This is Captain Woodrow F. Call, and I'm Captain Augustus McCrae.
They say the both of you were Texas Rangers back in the old days.
They lived by the strength of their word.
Just I ain't no criminal. Sorry you crossed the line.
Their courage guided the course of a nation.
I don't see why you have to go up to Montana where the Indians cannot fight you.
But I'd like to see at least one more place that ain't settled before I take up the rocking chair.
They say you clean the Comanches out and
Take that big fiddle out from between your legs. There are ladies present. But sir, I don't want no trouble. You just tuck it up under your chin the way a fiddle's supposed to be played. Now.
Yes, sir. Now, sir.
That's good.
Ramey has trained most of their officer corps. He's nearly a legend in the submarine community.
The most deadly submarine ever built.
This thing could park a couple of hundred warheads off Washington. Nobody'd know a thing about it until it was all over.
And once more, we play our dangerous game with our old adversaries, the American Navy.
His plan is a mystery.
A man with your responsibilities reading about the end of the world.
Apparently he has suffered a kind of nervous breakdown in which he announced his intention to fire his missiles on the United States.
You want us to help you hunt him down, kill him?
Open the outer doors. Firing point proceed.
Colonel.
You snotty little bastard.
Your Honor, I'd like to ask for a recess.
I'd like an answer to the question, Judge.
The court will wait for an answer.
You can't handle the truth.
You're damn right I ordered the code red.
My most defining memory of Grandpa is from a week or so before he got sick. He called me one day out of the blue, which wasn't unusual, and this time he really wanted to talk. He asked me about my personal life, my job at the VA, and asked if I was happy with everything. I walked out onto my deck, and we ended up talking for almost an hour, which was unexpected, but most welcome. Eventually, he had to go. I told him I loved him and hung up the phone. I remember thinking, even in these early COVID moments, strangely I wasn't too worried about him, because he was Grandpa. He was invincible. I couldn't imagine anything happening to him. He was that guy. He had been a part of my life since the beginning, and I thought he was going to live forever. That ended up being the last time I spoke to him. I think back on that conversation a lot. I'm so grateful that I was able to talk to him and put his mind at ease, that I could let him know that I am doing all right. And as much as I think about him almost daily, that conversation has made things so much easier.
Here's to the ones that we got. Cheers to the wish you were here, but you're not. 'Cause the drinks bring back all the memories of everything we've been through. Toast to the ones here today. Toast to the ones that we lost on the way. 'Cause the drinks bring back all the memories. And the memories bring back your. There's a time that I remember when I did not know no pain. When I believed in forever and everything would stay the same. Now my heart feel like December when somebody say your name. 'Cause I can't reach out to call you, but I know I will one day. Hey. Everybody hurts sometimes, everybody hurts someday. Hey, hey. But everything gon' be alright. Gonna raise a glass and say, hey. Here's to the ones that we got. Cheers to the wish you were here, but you're not. 'Cause the drinks bring back all the memories of everything we've been through. Toast to the ones here today. Toast to the ones that we lost on the way. 'Cause the drinks bring back all the memories. And the memories bring back your. Memories bring back your. There's a time that I remember when I never felt so lost. And I felt all of the hatred was too powerful to stop. Now my heart feel like an ember and it's lighting up the dark. I'll carry these torches for you, and you know I'll never drop. Yeah, everybody hurts sometimes, everybody hurts someday. Yeah, but everything gon' be alright. Gonna raise a glass and say, hey. Here's to the ones that we got. Cheers to the wish you were here, but you're not. 'Cause the drinks bring back all the memories of everything we've been through. Toast to the ones here today. Toast to the ones that we lost on the way. 'Cause the drinks bring back all the memories. And the memories bring back your. Memories bring back your. Memories bring back your. Memories bring back your.
You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view. Till you climb inside of his skin, walk around in it.
The trait I am most proud of is how devoted you were to your family. I miss your back rubs and hugs. You gave me love and support when I needed it most. I loved how you would call me my girl.
Another thing I'll remember with Cliff is he was an incredibly helpful person. He helped us out so much the year we got married with our house and our yard. He helped us throughout the years with various projects that we had, and he helped so many elderly family members in their final years. He's very generous with his time. The world would be a better place if we could all be like him.
Cliff was sweet. He was nice to me, friendly, and it had a memory in there about our wedding rehearsal. It was supposed to start at a certain time, and my dad was not there. He was late, like late. And I started crying because I was so stressed out. And Cliff was so nice, and he gave me his hanky. So good. He always carried hankies, and that was just sweet. He was nice. He was kind. Always liked giving hugs.
I enjoyed my time as their son-in-law and the times that we spent together traveling, playing cards and getting together. But we also had a great time on the trip we took together when we took a cruise to Hawaii and back. It was so neat to be out there in the middle of the ocean and so calm. We had a great time.
I have many wonderful memories of Clifford Youngstrom. He was always a caring and loving father-in-law to me and the best grandpa to my children that anyone could ask for. He always had hugs for his family and sometimes a little back rub. I enjoyed going for walks with him and playing pinochle with him and Barb. A very fond memory is a time when Steve and I were very first married, and he and Barb drove to Cape Girardeau to nurse us back to health as we were very sick with some kind of flu. They brought us some food and an old vintage vaporizer made out of glass. I wasn't too sure about that vaporizer, but the care and love they brought with them in their hearts was enough to jumpstart our health back. He was a very caring person who loved his family very much. I have learned much from Cliff, and I so appreciate the fact that I was able to share a part of his life with him.
Cliff was a special man in so many ways. He was truly a man of honor. He had a firm strength, but with a kind and gentle touch. For me, his sincere hugs said it all without words. His deep love, acceptance, and understanding were felt with each embrace. I treasure the many wonderful memories of my times with him and will forever miss his enveloping, warm hugs.
Father, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for the wonderful life you have given me, the good health and beautiful family you have blessed me with. I am eternally grateful, but most of all, I thank you for the gift of your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, who suffered and died for our sins and continues to love us and forgive us today. Help us to be worthy to be with you in heaven when our days on this earth are fulfilled. Amen.
Hello, this is Clifford. You're going to leave a message. You'll have to do a few things to leave me a message. First, you'll have to identify who you are. Then you'll have to leave your phone number. Please give me your area code too. Then state the nature of your call in a short and concise few sentences, and then I'll try and return your call.
Here's to the ones that we got. Cheers to the wish you were here, but you're not. 'Cause the dreams bring back all the memories of everything we've been through. Close to the ones here today, close to the ones that we lost on the way. 'Cause the dreams bring back all the memories, and the memories bring back you. There's a time that I remember when I did not know no pain, when I believed in forever and everything would stay the same. Now my heart feel like December when somebody say your name. 'Cause I can't reach out to call you, but I know I will one day, yeah.
Everybody hurts sometimes, everybody hurts someday, yeah. But everything will be alright. Go as your voice will say, hey.
Here's to the ones that we got. Cheers to the wish you were here, but you're not. 'Cause the dreams bring back all the memories of everything we've been through. Close to the ones here today, close to the ones that we lost on the way. 'Cause the dreams bring back all the memories, and the memories bring back you. Memories bring back you. There's a time that I remember when I never felt so lost, when I felt that all the hatred was too powerful to stop. Now my I'll carry these torches for ya. Let you know I'll never drop. Yeah.
Everybody hurts sometimes, everybody hurts someday. Hey, hey. But everything gon' be alright. Go and raise your voice and say, hey.
Here's to the ones that we got. Cheers to the wish you were here, but you're not. 'Cause our dreams bring back all the memories of everything we